So this slide will be dealing with complementary goods. So complements are pairs of goods in which when the price of one decreases, demand of the other increases. So when the price of one product decreases, demand for that product tends to increase. And a complementary product, the demand of that product will also increase. When there's a downward movement in the demand curve of one of the products, the demand curve of the other one will shift right. This is demonstrated in the graph here. The red curve is the demand curve of the first product, and the green curve is the demand curve of the second product. So first there's a downward movement in the demand curve of product A. So the red dot here was where it originally was, and there's a downward movement down to this second red dot. This results in the demand curve of product B shifting right. So it moves from the first green curve here and shifts right to the second green curve there. So complementary goods also have a negative cross-elasticity of demand. A negative change in the price of product A results in a positive change in the demand for product B. So as cross-elasticity of demand equals the change in demand over the change in price, a negative change in demand over a positive change in price will equal a negative value. A positive change in the price of product A will result in a negative change in demand for product B. So again, the XED is the change in demand over the change in price, but this time it's a positive value over a negative value, but will again result in a negative value. So an example of complementary goods are printers and inks. When the price of printers decrease, the demand for them increase, and since you need ink every time you buy a printer, the demand for ink will also increase. When the price of printers increase, the demand for ink will decrease, as when the price of printers increase, the demand for printers decrease, and therefore you don't need as much ink. So printers and ink have a negative cross-elasticity of demand, which proves that they are complementary goods. This slide will deal with substitute goods. So substitutes are pairs of goods in which when the price of one decreases, the demand of the other also decreases. This is due to the fact that when the price of a product decreases, the demand for it increases, and the demand for the product that you could buy instead of the first product will have to decrease. When there's a downward movement in the demand curve of one of the products, the demand curve of the other product will shift left. This is demonstrated in the graph here. So the red curve represents the first product's demand curve, and the green product represents the second product's demand curve. So a downward movement in the demand curve of product A is the movement of the first red dot to the second red dot. And this results in the demand curve of product B shifting left from the first green line to the second green line. So substitute products have a positive cross-elasticity of demand. A negative change in the price of product A will result in a negative change in the demand for product B. So here's the formula for cross-elasticity of demand again, the percent change in demand over the percent change in price. So this will be a negative value over a negative value, which will result in a positive value. A positive change in the price for product A will result in a positive change in the demand for product B. This will result in a positive value over a positive value, which when calculated will also end up as a positive value. So for example, skateboards and roller skates are considered substitutes. When the price of skateboards decrease, the demand for roller skates also decrease. This is due to the fact that when the price of skateboards decrease, the demand for them increase, which means more people want to buy skateboards, which indicates that less people will want to buy roller skates and cause the demand for roller skates to decrease. When the price of skateboards increase, the demand for roller skates also increase. So when the price of skateboards increase, the demand for skateboards decreases and more people will want to buy the product they can buy instead of skateboards, which are roller skates. So skateboards and roller skates have a positive cross-elasticity of demand. This slide will deal with normal goods. So for a normal good, when the income of the population rises, the demand for the good will also increase. A typical good is considered a normal good. This will cause the demand curve of the product to shift right when the income of the population increases. This is represented by the graph here. So this is the demand curve for the normal good. So first, the income of the population increases. Next, the demand curve for the normal good will shift right. This is due to the fact that they have more disposable income, the population, so they'll want to buy more of the good, typical goods such as name brand clothing, and they will buy more at every price range. So normal goods have a positive income elasticity of demand. So a positive change in the income of the customer results in a positive change in the quantity demanded of the good. So the income elasticity of demand equals the percent change in demand over the percent change in income. So when there's a positive change in income, there'll be a positive change in demand, which will result in a positive value for the income elasticity of demand. A negative change in the income of the customer results in a negative change in the quantity demanded of the good. So using the formula again, this time we'll get a negative value over a negative value, which will end up being a positive value. So for example, movie tickets are normal goods. As the income of the population increases, they have more money to spend on going to the movies, and the demand for movie tickets increase. As the income of the population decreases, they have less money to spend on going to the movies, and the demand for movie tickets decrease. This slide deals with inferior goods. When the income of a population rises, the demand for inferior goods decreases. This will cause the demand for the product to shift left when the income of the population increases. So this is demonstrated in the graph here. The red curve represents the inferior good demand curve. So the income of the population increases. This results in the demand curve for the inferior good shifting left from the first red curve to the second red curve. So inferior goods have a negative income elasticity of demand. So a negative change in the income of the customer results in a positive change in the quantity demanded of the good. As the income elasticity of demand is the percent change in demand over the percent change in income, this will be a positive value divided by a negative value, which will result in a negative value. A positive change in the income of the customer results in a negative change in the quantity demanded of the good. So this time there will be a negative value divided by a positive value, but again will result in a negative value. For example, non-name brand clothing is considered inferior goods. This is due to the fact that when the income of the population increases, they want to buy more brand name clothing, and therefore do not want as much non-name brand clothing. Contrarily, when the income of the population decreases, they have less money to spend on name brand clothing, and the demand for non-name brand clothing increases.